Adina, first time we spoke was the beginning of the Big Questions in Free Will project. It's now over. Tell me about your part of the project, what your thoughts were at the beginning, if you can recall, how it's progressed, and what you're happy about, frustrations, retrospective.
So the project overall, I think before it started, I was really excited to take part in it because there were such a great collection of people, and the project sounded really interesting. And I don't think I was at all disappointed in that regard. I think the talks in the final session were really interesting. I thought perhaps there would be sort of one unified conclusion that stemmed from it all, but that, it's philosophy. No, that doesn't happen. Right. So, I think there were advances made in different areas, and with respect to the project I did with Peter and Talia and Walter, I think we got interesting results that pretty much bore out what I expected. I had another project in which I had proposed to look more closely at how the monkey neural data compares to human data, how we can, to what extent can we use monkeys as a model for humans in decision making. And I had the opportunity to spend a summer in a monkey lab learning how to do the data analysis and set up experiments, and it just took a lot longer than I expected to get up to speed. So pretty much by the end of the summer, I had set up the experiment that I really intended to run. And unfortunately, thus far, we haven't gotten a postdoc or student to run that experiment. But the idea of the experiment was to look at potential differences in awareness or self-consciousness during decision making. And so in this lab, they have a task in which they get monkeys to not only make decisions about stimuli that are sort of ambiguous, but make decisions in such a way that they can decide whether they're confident enough in their decisions to stick with the decision or to opt out and get a lesser but certain reward. So that's a post-decision wagering task. And that task, at least it's most likely that task requires some kind of meta consciousness of the decision. And what we wanted to do is see whether the behavior and statistics of humans doing that kind of task is the same or different as the monkeys, and basically push the boundaries of how far we can use monkey decision making as a model for humans. Because one area in which people hypothesize that there's a difference is that monkeys, they make decisions, but they don't do it in the same way, and they're not aware of their decision-making process the way humans are. And I think that's probably false, but we still don't have the data that would give us.
That's a fairly significant point. It has to do with self-awareness, understanding of future times, and the relationship between the two.
That's right.
And so, what would be the outputs of such an experiment? A statistical analysis of what monkeys doing versus humans? Would you push it into the neural interventions in terms of recordings, or that would be a subsequent step?
So we actually have the neural data from the monkeys doing this kind of task, but what we don't know is whether the way in which they do this task is the same way in which humans do it. And so what I was going to explore is, statistically how similar are behaviors in humans and monkeys doing this task, and then if they really showed isomorphism, then I think the inference would be that humans do it in the same way monkeys do it, and you could infer that the same kind of
So even though you haven't run the experiment, there's such an experimental design is actually a good step forward. If you're confident that experimental design at least can move you towards that type of thinking, comparing monkey decision making and human decision making. So, in specific, what are the hypotheses? In other words, how is the monkey doing it, and what kind of statistics can you simulate in advance that could allow us to appreciate the experimental design?
I think that's a hard thing to to answer because there are lots of different statistics that describe the monkey behavior. The sensitivity to risk and reward and the percentage of errors and how it changes depending on the difficulty of the task. And the idea would be to design the experiment as similar for humans as it is for monkeys. Humans aren't really driven by juice rewards, for instance, so you have to change the reward structure somehow, but try to build the tasks to be as isomorphic to the monkey task. And then if you see that the statistics are the same, then you can infer that the underlying neural activity
And what does
governing
statistics the
it,
same mean?
that humans make the same kinds of risk-reward trade-offs, that they make the same kind of errors, that the speed of the decision is comparable. So there are just many parameters that you can look at, and it's not even clear at the outset which ones would be the most telling. I think, this was really, the first step at trying to see whether there was evidence for some kind of meta-awareness in monkeys doing a decision task. And then also use the neural data that we have from that task to make inferences about human decision making.
And describe to me the nexus between decision making in monkeys, humans is interesting in itself, and a broad discussion of free will.
Yeah, so I think most people think that what it is to act freely or to will freely is to make some kind of decision that's not necessarily sort of a mechanistic, automatic process that you as the human have no hand in. And one way in which you can have a hand in the process is by consciously deciding or changing your decision based on other kinds of considerations. And that's the sort of thing that the post-decision wagering task asks the monkey to do. It shows a certain kind of flexibility in decision making that at least at the first level is at odds with the kind of determinist view that everything you do just automatically follows without any kind of import for consciousness or volition or value or et cetera.
Okay, just take a giant step back, and as a neuroscientist, as a philosopher, having understood all the issues of free will and from both categories, what has the project done from that perspective? Pulling yourself out, now you're the omniscient observer of what occurred.
The big project.
Yeah.
There were still people in the project who really didn't come around to saying, yes, we're all free. There are still people who are skeptical about freedom and incompatibilists of some sort. But I would say that overall,
Why do you say still? Why do you say still? You say still as if the goal is to reach your view.
Yeah, that's a good point, but I think it's the correct view. I think that part of what the project was aiming to do was get people talking to each other from different disciplines who had different points of view. And it's my sense that people who are incompatibilists have a very sort of traditional notion of what free will must be in order for it to exist. And that that's just not the best notion to work with. And so
you're disappointed
one
you couldn't convince those guys.
I'm always disappointed. It's actually one of the big lessons for me in becoming a philosopher from being a scientist is that maybe I have to change my standards, but you give a scientific talk and you know that you're successful if you convince the people listening to your talk to believe what you think is the take-home message from your results. And I think most scientists feel that way, that the point is to convince the audience and get them to believe what you believe.
Right.
And that almost never happens in philosophy. And for years, I felt like I failed because it would be clear that at the end of the talk, not everybody agreed with me. And I think I feel that way a little bit about this project. I think I had some hopes that, especially scientists who I think typically don't have a particularly sophisticated idea of what free will is, would sort of come around and see things in a more nuanced way and become compatibilists.
Right.
But that didn't happen across the board, and I don't think I'm disappointed by it, but I just think it's noteworthy that we didn't get consensus at the end of the project. But I do think that everybody benefited from, seeing everyone else's experiments and understanding better how different people viewed the problem. So I do think it was successful, but it wasn't, we didn't come out with an unequivocal view of, this is what free will means and we do have it or we don't have it. There's no sort of single take-home result from the project.